The Omaha 2 Report. I'm Michael Richardson. The Omaha 2 are Black Panther leaders Ed Poindexter and Mondo Ilanga, both serving life sentences for the murder of Omaha policeman Larry Menard in 1970. Convicted in a COINTELPRO rigged trial, where J. Edgar Hoover had personally ordered evidence withheld, the two men wait justice. 40 years later, attorney Jeffrey Haas traveled to Omaha to discuss the murder of Fred Hampton and other COINTELPRO abuses.
And there was one of my partners, Skip Andrew. And I looked at him, he was already his coat and tie, and he said, the chairman's been killed. They vamped on the Panthers' apartment this morning. And I thought, I had just seen Fred 2 days before as alive, and I couldn't believe his words. And I thought, Fred Hampton was somebody who made us believe that we were invincible, and I was just being told he was dead. And I said to Skip, well, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to go to the morgue and with one of the Panthers and identify the body. And I said, well, what should I do? And he said, why don't you go interview? There was a raid this morning on the Panther, on Fred Hampton's apartment. There were 2 people killed, but there are survivors, and 3 of them are at the jail. So that morning I put on my suit and tie, and I went to the Wood Street Police Station, where Deborah Johnson, who was Fred's fiancée, who was 8.5 months pregnant with their child, came out in her nightgown. And at first Hanrahan did not allow me to interview them, and I threatened, I read a statute, and so finally I got to see her. And I'm going to read one more time. It was cold in the tiny windowless interview room in the Wood Street Police Station. I looked across the wooden table at the large-boned woman with a short afro who was shaking and sobbing. Deborah Johnson's patterned nightgown outlined her protruding belly, revealing her pregnancy. Fred never really woke up, she said. He was lying there when they pulled me out of the bedroom. She paused. And then I asked, 2 pigs went back into the bedroom. One of them said, he's barely alive, he'll barely make it. I heard 2 shots. Then I heard, he's good and dead now. Fred's fiancée looked at me with sad, swollen eyes. What can you do? I couldn't think of any reply. I couldn't bring Fred back to life. Deborah that morning and 2 of the other survivors, they had told me that the police came in shooting. And while I was interviewing them, Hanrahan was on TV. Can people hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hanrahan was on TV. And Hanrahan's version was, he had all these weapons that he said he found at the Panther office there. And he said the police were serving a search warrant. And they came in the front door, and they came in the back door. And they said as they came in, the Panthers opened fire from the bedrooms, from the living room, the middle room, and this is the bedroom where Fred Hampton and Deborah Johnson. Remember, Deborah Johnson had said they were sleeping in a bed. It was a double bed, a mattress on the floor, like this, and that the police came in. She was pulled out of the room, and that the police then went in, and she heard 2 shots, and Fred was then found dead. Hanrahan's version was very different. Hanrahan said the police were serving a search warrant. They knocked on the door, and the Panthers from these 3 directions opened fire on the police coming in the front door over here and the back door over here. And he said Fred Hampton was lying in this bed. He had a .45 caliber revolver. He was shooting at the police coming in the back door. And he said, but the police said there were 3 times they called ceasefires, and 3 times the Panthers opened fire. He also said that they didn't know it was a Panther apartment. On the other hand, they went in with shotguns, rifle, handguns, and a .45 caliber machine gun. So clearly they knew what they were doing. They weren't disarming an old woman who had an unregistered weapon. They went in there knowing who was inside, and they went in with armed to the teeth. They also went in at 4:30 in the morning. Not only was Fred killed, but Mark Clark, who was here at the front, was also killed. Three people in the middle bedroom were also shot, and and someone in the living room, and 3 other people were only beaten up by the police. So, of course, Hanrahan is saying these Panthers opened fire. He was charging them with attempted murder. Meanwhile, my partner, Skip, who had knocked on my door, he had the presence to go to the apartment. For some reason, which we've never totally understood, the police did not seal it off. So my partner called for a filmmaker and a minister. And they opened the door and they filmed the gathering of evidence. They filmed the walls. They filmed the picking up of each bullet fragment that they found in the apartment. And so the story that I was being told by the survivors and the evidence that they were finding did not fit with Hanrahan's story. And so the Panthers were smart enough to start leading tours through this apartment. And the tours showed that all the bullets except one, about 90 shots, came from the direction of the police toward the Panthers, toward the back bedroom, the middle bedroom, and the living room. The only shot out was from a weapon of Mark Clark, who was killed, and it went straight up through the front door into the ceiling above the hallway. And it was most likely a shot, an involuntary shot, when he had already been hit and was falling, because it went like this. And it didn't really fit. If you were trying to shoot at someone, you wouldn't shoot straight up. So it was 90 shots to 1. The Panthers started taking the press through, and the people in the black community came through. And even though the community was very much divided about the Panthers, they didn't accept the fact that a young black leader was killed in his bed at 4:30 in the morning, and another man was killed at the front door. And so all of the people, these black politicians who had been very beholden to Daley, began to speak out for the first time. In Mondo, where politically it's not viable for states' attorneys or for political candidates to look at the evidence and say, these men deserve a new trial. And instead of that, they go with the popular sentiment, well, their victims were police officers, and therefore we're not going to get any political credit for helping out.
Although the Omaha Two were with the fate of Fred Hampton, they were not able to avoid life in prison.